That's what it would sound like if people replaced cars. But what if cars replaced people? That's exactly what autonomous vehicle companies like Waymo are trying to discover. Thanks to the miracles of science, engineering, and venture capital, over the last few decades, autonomous vehicles have evolved from fringe experiments to a technology capable of dominating our roads. But should we accept these contraptions as the future of transportation, as many suggest? Let's pop the hood on this thing. To tell the story of driverless cars, one must travel back to the beginning of time. 17 years ago at the University of Washington. It was here on this crunchy-ass campus in the spring of 2009 when STEM nerds were smoking weed out of apple bongs and losing their virginities to MGMT. It was also when AI and robotics engineer Sebastian Thrun gave a lecture on creating a safer, more efficient system of transportation in which smart cars could communicate with each other and even drive themselves with AI.
If you look at today's transportation sector in the United States, it is, in my opinion, irresponsibly uneconomical and dangerous. We lose 42,000 people every year in traffic accidents. I think we are ready for a revolution in the area of transportation that could rival or parallel the revolution the internet has brought about.
Now, Thrun wasn't just spreckensing out of his Deutsch here. 4 years earlier, he had helmed a team of Stanford engineers who developed a robot car named Stanley that won the 2005 DARPA Grand Challenge, a competition created by the Defense Department to spur innovation in autonomous vehicles. Here's Thrun lying to camera.
The most important thing for me is it actually doesn't matter who comes first. It matters that we as a community achieve it.
But still, Sebastian Thrun came first. Soon after, an even scarier institution than the Department of Defense came calling for Thrun's services: Google.
Sebastian Thrun is here, the founder and head of Google X. The New York Times has called it Google's lab of wildest dreams.
While at Google, Sebastian led a slew of wild projects, including Street View and a moonshot project codenamed Project Chauffeur, which would later change its name to Waymo. By 2017, Waymo had split off from Google and became its own operation under Google's parent company, Alphabet. Shortly after, they began testing passenger service in the verdant, lush, green city of Phoenix, Arizona. By 2024, they opened robotaxi service up to all of San Francisco. And that's exactly where I traveled to in 2026, where I met Sebastian at his office, where they were having Bring a Pale YouTuber to Work Day. You are known as the father of modern self-driving cars. How do you feel your children are behaving these days?
So far, so good, knock on wood. You go to San Francisco, you can't cross the street without seeing a Waymo, and so far we haven't hurt a person. I was scared in the beginning to put the Stanley technology onto public streets because it wasn't perfect, and it was like picturing, oh my God, the child runs out and our self-driving car would kill a person, and that hasn't happened. But it was very clear to me, if you use machine learning, if your cars can learn, they get better every day. If a human driver makes a mistake, maybe that one person gets better. But if a self-driving car makes a mistake, all the self-driving cars improve overnight, including the unborn cars. So it was very clear to me that we would get better, better, and better, and better. And it was just a question of time. When would we exceed human safety? And that happened about 2 years ago.
Do you think one of the benefits of Waymo is that if a Waymo cuts me off on the road, I can flip it off and no one gets mad?
It doesn't honk its horn.
But enough jokes. Right now, Waymo is autonomously riding some serious momentum. This spring, they eclipsed 500,000 rides per week. The company has also expanded beyond its initial market of San Francisco, Phoenix, and LA into other cities that we built for bachelor parties, including Austin, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Orlando. And much like my waist when the old ball and chain whips up her famous tuna casserole, Waymo plans to continue aggressively expanding. Earlier this year, they raised $16 billion, valuing the company at $110 billion, and they aim to push into international markets like London and Tokyo while upping their rides per week to 1 million or more this year. And while Waymo is the undisputed market leader in this shit, they do face increased competition from the likes of Zoox, which is owned by Amazon, and Tesla, which is owned by Grendel.
I want to see the point where Waymo transport is going to be cheaper than car ownership. That's my inflection point, where people will rationally say, owning a car costs me extra money. So even people like in the rural population that today all own cars. When that happens, we can have a greener world because cars will be utilized better, and we're going to get to a city like San Francisco without parked cars on the sidewalk. We lose 1.2 2 million people every year in the world to traffic accidents. It's a massive number of people. It's like the cause of death #1 for young people, like your audience. Okay? You will die. If you die, you probably die either because of drug overdose or because of a car accident in America. That can be limited now.
But I'm a pretty good drunk driver.
Yeah, good for you.
I don't know if you noticed, but we live in a recurring revenue world where it seems like every business you interact with wants you locked in a subscription cycle that's hard to cancel. Countless times during my online shopping sprees, I found an item that's just perfect, only to discover that BuyGuysTies.net wants my credit card information so they can charge me for their monthly menswear subscription newsletter and fan club. What? And the point is that, by golly, it is annoying when subscription businesses are just waiting on you to forget to cancel a free trial, or maybe they're building in hidden fees, hoping you won't comb through your bank statements. Those bastards. And the follow-up point is that today, I am offering you a solution to this problem. And that solution is privacy. Not the concept, but the company. Privacy is essentially a structural tool that take the power away from the corporate subscription models and put it back in your hands by creating a secure layer between your real card and the merchant. So even if a merchant gets compromised, there's nothing useful to steal. They've got a fantastic slate of features for your perusal. Personally, I'm partial to these ones. The merchant locked cards. They're virtual numbers that bind permanently to the first shop or website they are used at. These are perfect for repeat bills like utilities, Netflix, or Amazon because the card won't function anywhere else if it appears in a data leak. Single-use cards are burner payment numbers that automatically self-destruct after one transaction. Ideal for one-off checkouts at unfamiliar online storefronts or free trials. Real-time control, the ability to pause, unpause, or set hard spending limits on any card instantly from a phone or computer browser. And last but not least, revenue integrity. Privacy does not monetize your information or sell shopping data to ad networks like those big banks and credit card companies do. No, no, no. Privacy makes its revenue from interchange fees paid by the merchants. And for extra anonymity, you can enable private spend mode to completely mask merchant names on your bank statement. So run. Don't walk, folks. Privacy has a free plan with no transaction fees for domestic purchases. Get your $5 sign-up bonus at privacy.com/goodwork and use it on your first purchase. Click the link in the description or go to privacy.com/goodwork. You look great today. Sebastian had a grandiose view of the future, one where we don't own, let alone drive cars, instead relying on a network of autonomous robo-taxis provided by a company like Waymo. But before I could get behind this energetic German's view for the future, I had to mount one of these clanker steeds myself. I certainly wasn't going to get in one without another person, and I don't consider my cameraman to be a person. So I hit up Kelly Waldron, San Franciscan and data reporter for Mission Local. Kelly has reported on Waymo's extensive lobbying efforts in San Francisco, which has been crucial to their success in the city. In 2025, the company recorded nearly 700 individual lobbying contacts with city officials, which accounted for 1/6 of lobbying contacts in the city total. And that's not just me saying that. That's math.
Why all the lobbying? What is Waymo trying to get done in the city that they haven't already done?
Waymo is very focused on getting access to San Francisco's airport, SFO. That's a gold mine for Waymo in terms of a new customer base and potential revenue. It's also a gold mine for the city that charges for companies that bring passengers to the airport. And now they do have access to the airport. So I actually saw I was looking this morning, the number of lobbying contacts this year is a lot lower. And I imagine that it's because they've kind of gotten what they were hoping to get. I think there are a lot of concerns about Waymo. I don't know that any of the concerns are about the driving itself. I think there are some obvious benefits that most people would acknowledge. You know, a driverless vehicle is not going to text and drive. It's not going to drive under the influence. It's stopping fully at every stop sign, and it's abiding by the law. I think there is skepticism about this technology for other reasons and what the impact will be on jobs or how it impacts the city's transit infrastructure in general and congestion. You are kind of adding a lot of cars on the road and not necessarily taking cars away or replacing other cars.
As Kelly mentioned, there are real concerns across the Bay about the mass implementation of Waymos and other autonomous vehicles. Concerns that are certainly shared by a group called Safe Street Rebel, which is apparently singular.
So we're Safe Street Rebel.
Safe Street Rebels?
Yeah.
What?
No S.
The streets of the Safe Rebels.
Singular.
Singular. The Safe Street Rebels are a group of San Franciscan activists who engage in demonstrations to protest cars and car infrastructure in the city. apparently involving large primates.
We do Grillo infrastructure. We have done things like block major intersections. We've done critical mass style bike rides that also block traffic, installed crosswalks, made benches.
How has Safe Street Rebels approached the introduction of Waymos?
We started off by putting cones on top of the hoods, and then I think they programmed them to learn that they can just ignore those cones. So we've adapted the tactics to just putting some tape over their LiDAR sensors. You can just use like plain painter's tape. It doesn't leave any residue. Cover the sensor and it'll stop right there. You can also hold a stop sign in front of it and it will stop. I also like to mess with them when I'm riding my bike, riding very slowly in front of them, or sometimes I'll try and make them stop suddenly by like being in their way. There's a lot of problems with Waymos. They're kind of similar to Uber and Lyft where they promised that they would significantly like reduce traffic, but with Uber and Lyft, they actually took up 2/3 of the 60% traffic increase that occurred between 2010 and 2016. So that traffic reduction claim was a lie.
I see Waymos as, it's like, ew, I don't want to ride transit, that's too yucky. To me, a good and beautiful city is one where transit is normal and where everyone is using it and it's easy to take, and more cars on the road makes it worse.
Emergency responders are not happy with them, but like city officials I think are pretty pro, and maybe not as for public transit as they should be.
Indeed, emergency first response leaders from SF and Austin have met with federal regulators to express their frustration about Waymo incidents, from slowing down emergency vehicles to driving into floods and potentially speeding through construction zones. Worst of all, these cars narked on some teens that were underage drinking. And teens, quite frankly, should be drinking in any vehicle, which has long been the policy of Dan Toomey's teens-only booze bus. But in addition to worries about how autonomous vehicles will merge with our transit systems, another speed bump on driverless cars' road to world domination is how they will impact taxi and Uber drivers.
How long did you drive a taxi cab in San Francisco?
About 23 years.
Barry Toronto is a former board member of the San Francisco Taxi Workers Alliance, where he is still an activist.
It does take some people's jobs away. Well, Waymo, you can't tell the Waymo, wait, can you back up a second? I forgot my friend. You know what I mean? My friend was supposed to get in,
sure.
Right? They can't help disabled people or seniors with luggage or with groceries.
But Barry, have you considered that it's a lot easier to get naked in the back of a Waymo?
Yes and no. It is, but you don't know. You don't know Waymo is using the video. It's adding in more cars on the street. Sometimes you can see 4 or 5 of them in a row, and you can't get around them. You have to wait for them, or you have to try and go around them. And it interferes with some of the bus routes, the bicycle lanes. They have used taxi zones to park in. At times, they don't know what to do.
So then is the official stance of the Taxi Workers Alliance that there's more regulation needed around driverless vehicles that's not there on the street?
We know they're not going to go away, but we do know there should be more restrictions on them because they're not ready to handle every situation.
So in the great driverless car wars, it's fair to say that San Francisco represents the great autonomous vehicle stronghold. But here in New York, we are people of culture who value the joy of a sloppy backseat taxi makeout with some second base hand stuff. Therefore, we are much more skeptical of the beep-boop wagons with cameras inside of them. Despite being the crown jewel for autonomous vehicle companies, given our large population of rich idiots who don't know how to drive, New York has become the center of political resistance to driverless cars. Back in January, Governor Kathy Hochul briefly introduced a proposal for allowing driverless taxis in the state outside of the city, but it was met with so much negativity that she quickly dropped it. Meanwhile, New York City Mayor and guy whose face is stuck like that, Zohran Mamdani, has not yet established a position on driverless vehicles, but is admittedly a pretty big pro-taxi guy. He once hunger-struck for taxi drivers, campaigning for debt relief, had one drive him to his inauguration, built his persona off of standing with labor unions, and appointed a longtime transit worker advocate to lead the Taxi and Limousine Commission.
Maintaining the dignity of workers is a key goal of the Mamdani administration.
Sarah Kaufman is the director of NYU's Rudin Center for Transportation Policy and Management. I barged into her transportation-themed office and did my best to not play with all of the fun toys she put around to distract me.
Here in New York, there are about 180,000 licensed taxi, Uber, and Lyft drivers. And if their jobs are to be automated out, that would create a catastrophic scenario in terms of job loss and the need for retraining and subsidizing a whole category of worker.
Is there a way of introducing autonomous vehicles into the city without being a direct threat to the jobs of taxi drivers, do you think?
There are a couple of ways that it could be done, although it is a very difficult scenario.
One approach Sarah told me about is the idea that Waymo could create and subsidize funds that would pay to help taxi workers retire, which is something that Waymo reportedly has already proposed to Governor Hochul. But in the eyes of Waymo's critics, funds like this pale in comparison to the employment and economic opportunity provided by being a licensed driver, especially for immigrants and citizens with few other employment opportunities. And who'd have thought a money-horny jackass like me would be standing up for the little guy? What? Am I the money-horny jackass or am I the little guy? Sarah also told me that ultimately, in a city like New York, we shouldn't let autonomous vehicles distract us from investing in mass transit.
I think what's the most important thing to keep in mind is that we don't want to add to traffic. That mass transit is still the most efficient way to move large numbers of people. So subways, buses, and in a lot of ways, taxis factor in here. We need to use those modes to move large numbers of people. We don't want to add more vehicles to the streets, otherwise we'll just have gridlock.
Indeed, this fear of autonomous vehicles leading to more cars on the road was a concern voiced by many I pretended to listen to throughout this investigation. It's this hope that a private company will solve a public issue, like supporting mass transit, that has critics criticking Waymo. After all, it wouldn't be the first time that us in the US turned to big car for a transportation solution. Or so says University of Virginia professor and transportation historian Peter Norton, who wrote the book Autonorama, the illusory promise of high-tech driving.
In 1934, engineers working for the U.S. auto industry said, you know, the real way to save lives, the 20th century way to make traffic safe is to make speed safe. And we're going to do that by putting, multi-level expressways, elevated highways right through every city in America. That was a catastrophic boondoggle.
Peter said that while he was impressed with autonomous vehicles technologically, he thinks that both the literal investment required to make them work and the opportunity cost of committing to them means that mass adoption of autonomous vehicles would be a huge mistake.
For them to work, it helps if the public sector comes along and makes accommodations like it did for the conventional automobile. For example, in so-called V2X technology, where you plant technology in the side of the road, in objects like lampposts and so on, which help the car know where it is. We can do that. That is a possibility. It would take public money. Some of it's already been happening. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do it because the advantages for the public in robotic cars just aren't that great. Robotic cars can't solve safety for the same reason that Airbnb can't solve homelessness. The costs just don't add up. To its credit, Airbnb doesn't claim it will solve homelessness. However, we still have the robotic car companies saying they will solve safety. If, for the sake of argument, we say it's significantly safer, which is especially Waymo's point right now, even if we were to agree with that, we then have the problem of how do you get even 1% or even 0.1% of the miles that people spend in a car in an automated car. Given the costs, that's not going to happen. And it's actually kind of worse than that because every time that argument prevails, it diverts resources and attention and policy support in favor of that path towards safety to the neglect of the really successful paths towards safety that we know work because they explain extraordinary improvements in safety in other countries that we have not had here.
The other potentially more cost-effective paths to safety that Peter's referencing here tend to include boring things that probably won't generate a metric dick ton of revenue for big tech companies, but might reduce traffic deaths as dramatically as autonomous vehicles claim they will. I'm talking about lame shit like roundabouts, wider sidewalks, elevated crosswalks, protected lanes for bikers that I hate, lower road speeds, technologically enforced speed limits, and restrictions on big-ass cars like those SUVs that suburban moms use to pick their hydro flasks up from Topgolf practice. None of these are as sexy as Car That Drives You, but they're a lot cheaper than retrofitting a metropolis for Waymos and have been proven to work in those Scandinavian cities. where everything's perfect and no one ever dies. But granted, folks, none of this means that old Dan here is fully anti-autonomous vehicle. Building a relatively green technology that can limit accidents and curb traffic seems like a much better use of Silicon Valley's resources than getting everyone addicted to short-form videos. Except for the ones that I make. But at the same time, the people telling us that driverless cars are the solution to all of our problems are the same people who stand to become gagillionaires if we go all in on this technology, while potentially overlooking less sexy solutions to safety issues. So while driverless cars certainly do seem like part of our future, my long 2 weeks on this beat has shown me that while the industry's promises sound good, it's best to cool our boots and avoid falling into the arms of big Waymo too fast. Because after all, we're still in the driver's seat, and we can still pump the brakes for now. And for good work, I'm Dan Toomey. Taxi.
Hello, this is with Waymo. How can I help?
Hi, I'm just taking a Waymo in San Francisco right now, and I just wanted to say that the ride has been a stellar quality so far.
Oh, thank you, sir. So, is there any problem with the vehicle? Everyone's safe?
Yep, we're all safe. Just wanted to say good job.
Thank you so much. If you still have further questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to let us know, okay?
Sounds good. Love you.
Thanks, sir. And thank you for calling, Waymo. Have a good one. Bye for now.
Bye for now. And do I end it? I think we had something.